Why does Johnny Whitaker still refuse to watch this one episode of Family Affair, even after nearly 6 decades? There's no controversy, no scandal, no behind-the-scenes feud, just one child, one scene, one memory so emotionally raw that even today Johnny Whitaker, beloved star of the 1960s, won't revisit it. This is the story of that episode, and why the pain behind it has never quite gone away. Long before Johnny Whitaker stepped onto a Hollywood soundstage, he was already a natural performer, without even knowing it. Raised in a large Mormon household in Van Nuys, California, Johnny was the 5th of 8 children. His parents, Thelma and John Sr., weren't actors or entertainers. They were everyday people. But even in that crowded household, Johnny stood out. He had a brightness to him, a charisma that didn't need polishing. At just 3 years old, that brightness caught the attention of a local TV director, casting a commercial for a small used car lot in Southern California. Most kids would freeze in front of bright lights and clunky 1960s television cameras, but not Johnny. He lit up the screen with an effortless charm that made audiences feel like he was speaking directly to them. For a toddler, he wasn't just delivering lines. He was connecting. From that single commercial, opportunities snowballed. Soon, Johnny was landing national campaigns for major brands. His big breakthrough came with Mattel, where he became the voice and face of their Animal Yakers toy line. These weren't just ads, they were showcases for Johnny's expressive talent. Pull the string on a talking lion or parrot, and it was Johnny's enthusiastic delivery that brought those toys to life. Kids begged their parents for them, not just because of the toys themselves, but because Johnny made them feel magical. It wasn't long before industry insiders began to see that Johnny had more than a cute face or good timing. He had emotional depth, an ability to intuit what a scene needed, even when he barely understood the script. In casting circles, directors started referring to him as the real deal, a child who could take direction like a seasoned adult, yet still radiate the unfiltered innocence that no adult could fake. What made Johnny's rise all the more unique was how early it all happened. Before he was old enough to start elementary school, he already had a professional resume more packed than most adult actors. And he wasn't just collecting roles, he was making an impression. Each performance, each appearance, laid the groundwork for something much bigger just around the corner. Because soon Johnny Whitaker would go from the kid in the commercial to a household name across America. But what no one could have predicted was just how much emotional weight that fame would ask him to carry, and how one particular episode would leave a mark he'd never be able to erase. Johnny Whitaker's career might have begun with toy commercials, but it wasn't long before Hollywood saw beyond the product placement. Casting agents recognized something deeper, a rare emotional clarity in a child so young. He wasn't just delivering cute one-liners, he had range, a sense of presence, and perhaps most remarkably, an ability to hold the screen without stealing it. In 1965, when Johnny was just 5 years old, he crossed the invisible threshold between commercial talent and legitimate dramatic actor. That year, he was cast as young Scotty Baldwin on the long-running soap opera General Hospital. This wasn't a novelty casting. This was a recurring role in one of television's most emotionally complex daytime dramas. For a child actor, the soap world was grueling. Tight scripts, fast-paced production schedules, and emotionally layered scenes written for adults. And yet, Johnny met the challenge head-on. His portrayal of Scotty was filled with genuine vulnerability. He could express sadness without melodrama, confusion without caricature. Directors were impressed how naturally he moved through emotionally taxing scenes. He didn't need line readings or exaggerated gestures. He just felt. The camera loved him because the audience believed him. That role planted Johnny firmly in the minds of casting directors, producers, and television executives. He was no longer the boy from the Mattel commercials. He was a young actor who could carry scenes alongside veteran performers and never look out of place. His success on General Hospital opened new doors almost immediately, especially in the world of network sitcoms and family dramas that were booming in the mid-60s. One opportunity in particular would come to define not just his career, but his life. It would arrive in the form of a major studio film, a Cold War satire with an ensemble cast and a co-star who would unknowingly shape Johnny's destiny. By 1966, Johnny Whitaker had already become a familiar face to American television audiences, but film offered an entirely new stage and a new kind of pressure. That year, he landed a small but notable role in The Russians Are Coming, a Cold War satire produced by Norman Jewison. The film was a big-budget Hollywood response to the political tension of the era, using comedy to challenge paranoia and soften the image of a supposed enemy. The stakes were high. The cast was stacked, and Johnny, just 6 years old, was stepping into the middle of it. Despite his limited screen time, Johnny brought a sincerity that caught more than just the audience's attention. On set, he crossed paths with Brian Keith, the film's lead actor and a towering figure in the industry, literally and figuratively. Keith had a reputation for being gruff, no-nonsense, and deeply professional. He didn't hand out compliments easily. But there was something about Johnny that stood out. Not just the talent, but the composure. The way he took direction. The way he interacted with adult actors, not as a prop, but as a peer. Their scenes together were minimal, but the impression Johnny left on Brian Keith was anything but small. Keith reportedly remarked to the crew that the little redhead had more discipline and poise than actors 3 times his age. It wasn't just praise, it was a mental note. Soon after the film wrapped, Keith was offered the lead in a new CBS sitcom called Family Affair. It was a departure from the film's political satire, a heart-driven family show about 3 orphaned children and the bachelor uncle who takes them in. It was warm, gentle, and carried the emotional weight of real-world grief beneath its sitcom surface. Casting the children was crucial. The show wouldn't work unless the kids felt authentic, real, lovable, and emotionally complex. When it came time to cast the role of Jody, Keith had one name ready: Johnny Whitaker. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was a personal recommendation. And in Hollywood, those matter more than auditions. That endorsement didn't just land Johnny the role, it changed the course of his life. Because Family Affair wouldn't just make Johnny a star, it would bind him forever to a television family that millions of viewers grew up loving, and to an episode he would never be able to forget. When Family Affair premiered in the fall of 1966, it wasn't expected to redefine family television, but it quietly did. The show's premise was deceptively simple. A globe-trotting civil engineer, Uncle Bill Davis, played by Brian Keith, suddenly becomes the legal guardian of his brother's 3 orphaned children. What followed was not a slapstick comedy, but a heartfelt portrait of grief, healing, and unconventional love. At the center of that emotional universe were the children. Older sister Sissy, played by Kathy Garver, and the younger twins, Buffy and Jody. And Johnny Whitaker was Jody Davis. With his wide-eyed sincerity and unforced charm, he became the emotional barometer of the show. He didn't just play Jody, he embodied him. Whether delivering a witty line or quietly sitting in the shadow of loss, Johnny gave Jody a beating heart that audiences instantly connected with. The magic, however, wasn't his alone. Anissa Jones, cast as his on-screen twin sister Buffy, brought a matching sweetness and quiet resilience to the screen. The two shared a chemistry so natural that producers rewrote the original concept, which had them as unrelated siblings, to instead make them twins. It was a subtle shift, but one that deepened the show's emotional stakes and its appeal. Together, they didn't feel like child actors. They felt like real children trying to make sense of a world that had changed forever. Each week, Family Affair walked a delicate line. It offered moments of gentle humor and light-hearted family dynamics, but always through the lens of deep emotional themes: abandonment, fear of loss, and the search for belonging. Johnny handled these themes with a maturity that belied his age. His scenes often carried a weight that only someone who understood vulnerability, whether consciously or not, could deliver. The show became a ratings success and a cultural fixture, especially among viewers who appreciated its quiet realism and emotional depth. Johnny, now a household name, was suddenly thrust into a level of fame that many adult actors struggled to handle. Fan letters flooded in, magazine covers followed, and behind the scenes, the pressure to maintain that image of perfection began to build. But while America was falling in love with Jody Davis, Johnny was still just a boy, navigating life, loss, and the stress of early stardom. And within that whirlwind of success, one episode, just one, would bring all of those emotions to the surface in a way no one could have predicted. It wasn't a dramatic death scene or a plot twist. It was a story about a missing doll. And for Johnny Whitaker, it would become the hardest scene he'd ever have to perform. In the first season of Family Affair, there was one episode that broke away from the light, humorous tone of the show. That episode was titled, "Mrs. Beasley, Where Are You?" At first glance, it seemed simple. Buffy loses her Mrs. Beasley doll, a constant companion and comforting object that helped her cope with the loss of her parents. The story revolves around the desperate search to find it. But what made the episode unforgettable wasn't the plot, it was the emotional weight behind it. The loss of the doll became a metaphor for something far deeper, the fear of losing the last piece of family, love, and safety. For Jodie and Buffy, it wasn't just a toy, it was their connection to a past they barely understood. For Johnny, filming that episode was not acting. It was reliving something he didn't know how to name. At 6 years old, he was already carrying the pressures of fame, long shooting days, and the demand to perform emotions that were sometimes all too real. During that episode, Johnny had to cry, but those tears weren't scripted. In interviews years later, he revealed that he wasn't just pretending to be sad, he was sad. The scene triggered something real in him. Memories of isolation, of not fully understanding the adult world he was being asked to navigate. The director praised him. "The performance was perfect," he said. "We didn't even need a second take." But behind the scenes, Johnny was drained and confused and hurt. He has since called that episode a capsule of pain. A moment frozen in time that captured something raw and unfiltered about childhood fame. What made the experience even more difficult was his deep, real-life bond with Anissa Jones. Johnny and Anissa weren't just co-stars, they were close friends. They played twins, but the emotional connection between them was genuine. Together, they navigated the strange world of stardom. Together, they gave comfort when the cameras weren't rolling. So when Family Affair ended in 1971, their paths began to diverge. And in 1976, Johnny received heartbreaking news. Anissa had died of a drug overdose at the age of 18. For Johnny, it was more than a tragedy. It was the loss of a part of himself, a reminder of the fragile innocence they both shared in front of the camera. And that made the episode, "Mrs. Beasley, Where Are You?" even more unbearable. Because it wasn't just about losing a doll, it became a mirror of losing a friend, losing childhood, losing safety. To this day, Johnny has never rewatched that episode. Fans still ask him, "Do you ever rewatch the show?" He says yes. He loves revisiting the memories. He's proud of what they created. But that episode? Never. Not out of shame, not out of embarrassment, but because it's too real. It reminds him of a time when he was too young to say no, too young to understand why he was hurting, and too isolated to ask for help. The performance was brilliant, but the pain was not pretend. Johnny has said watching that episode would feel like tearing open an old wound, one that never fully healed. It reminds him of the complexities of childhood stardom, of being adored by millions but unsure if anyone really saw him. It's a moment he's chosen to leave behind. And that choice, that's his power. Johnny Whitaker's career continued long after Family Affair. He starred in Disney films like Snowball Express, The Biscuit Eater, and the musical Tom Sawyer, where his portrayal of the mischievous, lovable boy became iconic. He took a break from acting, studied computer science, worked as a talent manager, and even became an addiction counselor, helping others fight their own demons. In 1999, he was awarded the Former Child Star Lifetime Achievement Award by the Young Artist Foundation, not just for the roles he played, but for the life he lived. Johnny Whitaker didn't just survive Hollywood, he learned from it. And he chose peace. So when he refuses to watch one single episode of Family Affair, it's not weakness, it's strength. It's the strength to say, that moment hurt me, and I don't need to relive it to prove anything to anyone. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is walk away from a memory and let it rest. If you found this story moving, be sure to like the video, subscribe for more deep dives into classic Hollywood, and tap the bell so you don't miss a future upload. Thanks for watching.